In the mid-90s, major music label BMG decided they'd try their hand at the video game market. They opened an interactive division in their London offices where two young employees, Sam and Dan Hauser, were looking for a creative outlet. They jumped at the chance to head the new division and quickly published a number of minor titles. But when DMA Design in Scotland approached them with a new idea, a freeform game that would allow gamers to do whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, the Hausers knew they had a hit on their hands. Grand Theft Auto would go on to be BMG Interactive's biggest hit, but it wasn't enough to save the division. BMG spun it off to upstart publisher Take-Two Interactive in New York. The brothers and their crew moved to New York City with the task of making a brand that would be synonymous with edgy, adult, groundbreaking gaming. And so, Rockstar Games was created. The only question was, could it deliver on the promise of Grand Theft Auto? Though Rockstar was technically a different company from BMG Interactive, all the top people were the same, including the Hausers. Continuing the relationships they had formed, they reached back out to DMA Design and got to work on Grand Theft Auto 2. The brothers remained an integral creative force in the title's development, helping keep the tone of the game focused and consistent. The result released in 1999 and, like its predecessor, sold well. It was largely the same game, though this time around it did feature factional gang warfare that the player could influence any way he wanted. Like GTA 1, GTA 2 ended up selling about 2 million units worldwide. Meanwhile, Rockstar reached out to other talent as well, publishing games like Midnight Club and Smuggler's Run. These too sold well. The new venture was doing alright. Nevertheless, the Rockstar crew had bigger ambitions than just doing alright. Rockstar wanted to push the boundaries of what games aspired to be, and in doing so, attract audiences who normally didn't play video games. They wanted to break away from the stigma that only nerds played games. They wanted their products to be as cool as hip-hop. To do that, they'd have to break away from the science fiction and fantasy trappings of most games and produce something that was both realistic and escapist at the same time. Of all the companies they worked with, they knew that DMA had hit closest to this mark with their Grand Theft Auto series. So, to make the next GTA game bigger, better, and grander than the earlier titles, the Hausers decided to dive headfirst into it. This time, they would not be making the same game with updated graphics. They'd be crafting their magnum opus. Sam became the director and producer of the new game, while Dan became the head writer. Where previous Grand Theft Autos had been barely narrative 2D drivers, this next game would be a character-driven, darkly comic saga of mobsters and mafiosos in 3 dimensions. This would make for a much more expensive game than others in the series, but Rockstars aren't made by playing it safe. Following on from its predecessors, the game would have a free-form style in an open, realistic city. There would be a main story with its own quests, but the gamer could choose to ignore it and go to any of hundreds of side quests, or ignore those too, and just go crazy on his own in one of the largest game worlds ever made. Far from yet another super soldier in space, this character would let gamers feel like an unrestrained street thug in the real world, a guy who could do all the things we'd love to try if only there were no consequences. And in a virtual world, there weren't. The end result was gleefully violent without any sort of moral compass. There was a wanted meter that would go up as the player committed more crimes, but since a high meter only drew more cops with better vehicles, that wasn't really a bad thing. Though the city was realistic, the gameplay was not. The driving mechanic was built more for the fun factor than anything approaching realism, and the quests themselves were more like a hybrid between the seedy underworld and the absurd. This was a world where jacking a police car was commonplace, and jacking a tank was even possible. Now that gives Grand Theft Auto a whole new meaning. It would also be one of the first games to make heavy use of a licensed soundtrack. The title featured several fake radio stations that played real-world songs, lending the game a further air of authenticity amidst its crazy antics. The story would bring the gamer deep into the underbelly of modern society, brought to life with top-notch voice acting and believable dialogue. The title dared to deal with adult issues like drugs, prostitution, and organized crime, much heavier fare than other games tried for. It would easily be the most adult game ever made, a twisted and sordid crime epic that enjoyed itself far too much. The combination of real-world environments and way over-the-top gameplay proved to be irresistible. Finally, there was a way for gamers to vent all those actions that society didn't allow, from running red lights, to running into cars, to running from the cops, to having the cops run from you. Grand Theft Auto 3 was an instant mega smash upon its release.
I'm proud of you, my boy. You kicked the shit out of those grease balls.
It was heralded as one of the most groundbreaking games in years, and to this day it is seen as a watershed moment in the art form's history. Its adult content and themes revolutionized how games were perceived, and whole new audiences who had never been interested in geeky video games bought PlayStation 2s to play Grand Theft Auto. Coming so early in the Sony console's release cycle, GTA was a large contributor to the PS2's early lead in the console war, a position it held throughout that entire generation. So strong was GTA's influence that Sony paid Take-Two to keep the franchise PlayStation exclusive, at least for a couple of years. But the popularity came with its own problems. Though there were plenty of other violent games on the market, for whatever reason politicians singled this one out as their new whipping boy. Australia even refused to rate it, effectively banning the title in that country. Also, a then unknown Florida lawyer and anti-gaming activist, Jack Thompson, claimed that the game was responsible for a 2003 teen murder in Ohio, kicking off a long line of Jack Thompson court battles that often involved Rockstar. But despite all their best efforts at keeping the game down, nothing drives sales like controversy. Grand Theft Auto was the new rock and roll. Tune in next time to see how Rockstar dealt with life at the top.